Hi everyone, what we're going to be doing today is creating a monster truck. This is a very low poly monster truck. Right now I have a couple things that make this look this way. The ambient occlusion is on and I have my lighting as flat lighting so that we can kind of see the details on here. Now what's nice about being able to work with low poly, I'm going to turn off my wireframe and turn on my lighting here. So once I have something like this done, instead of going into the modeling toolkit and hitting smooth, I can actually just hit the 3 on my keyboard, and with the objects that were selected, you'll see a poly smooth preview or a mesh smooth preview. So that's nice. The smooth preview is extremely helpful to use, and it gives us a pretty accurate result of what the smooth button would be. This is the way I want you to work. I do not want you smoothing up your final submissions. You'll just go from having everything selected, hit 3, and we'll get that smooth preview going on, and to go back from there, make sure everything is selected, hit 1 on your keyboard, and now you'll go back to that regular shape mode. I'm sure all of you at some point have accidentally pressed either 3 or 2 on your keyboard and you've been totally confused about that. That is why that's doing that. So how do we create this stuff? Well, let's get this going. Inside of Maya, I'm going to go into File, New Scene, and I'm going to make sure that I select the proper panels I want to work with. So if I'm in top view, I'm going to go to Create, Free Image Plane, and I am going to add my top reference. Now, if it loads like this, right now it's top view, it's not the way we would expect to see reference. We'd expect it to look like this. The way that we could fix that is going into it, selecting it over in our outliner. We can just apply a rotation to it. So if we want to rotate this probably on the x-axis, we're going to do negative or 90, and there we go. And let's go into perspective. We want to, let's see, go into our side view, create free image plane. Again, that's causing some issues for us. Let's load up the model first and then we'll deal with that. So in our attribute editor, we'll open up the side truck, open that up. Okay, so we want to make sure these are all facing that same direction. Image plane 2. Right now, let's have that selected. Channel box, the rotation has to be 90 on that. Okay, so it looks like I've got some stuff flipped here. Let me just make sure that should be 180. So 180 here, and I want this to be the opposite direction there. So let's go 180 on that one as well. Alright, I've got both of these set up the way they should be, but they're obviously in the way of each other. So I'm going to go in my perspective view and just kind of fix that. That's looking pretty good. Just to make it so it's flush with that ground plane with the wheels. It's pretty good there. Alright. Now, last but not least, I need to get my front view in. So inside of, right, we'll just create it in perspective and modify it here. Create free image plane. My attribute editor, I'm going to load my front, and we'll move that over, and we will also, making sure we have that selected under the channel box, rotate that negative or 90 degrees. There we go. Alright, let's make sure these are all aligned. So I'm going to go into a viewport that makes sense. I'm going to make it so the wheels are kind of landing on right there. I'm going to line up this line with my center point. There we go. So now I'm at my origin here, and we'll just make sure by checking my other perspectives that this is all lining up. This looks good. Alright, this should work out pretty well for me. Now all these are selectable, and I still see some of you working on stuff like this, and it causes such a nightmare when you're working. Make sure if this is occurring that you're just going into your layers, you're adding this to a layer, you press R to lock it down. Now you can't mess with it. We're going to turn this into a reference layer, and let's start working. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the wheel, and the wheel is pretty simple. It is going to start with a cylinder. I'm going to pull out some extrusions on it, and I'm going to also make sure the side's going to be unique, but the top and the front are going to be the same, because we're kind of seeing a rotating shape that's all on that same axis. So we're going to make sure we look at our side and our front. If I create my cylinder and I apply a rotation, I need it to rotate on this axis, and we can see that that's the axis it's pointing at right there, X. So we're going to rotate that 90 degrees. Now that I have that, I'm going to go into, let's see, I may have linked these up a little bit differently than the way it's saying, but that's okay. We can also create a new there we go, back. So that should be a little bit flipped, but that's okay. As long as you can actually get these references loaded up, the names don't really matter. I'm going to use it this way. So I'm in this viewport, moving this up here. If we can't see what we're doing, go to X-ray mode. Alright, there we go. Moving this in. So I'm going to start. So I have it on the origin. It seems really small. Or not the origin, sorry, the point. Go back to back. Scale this up. Pretty good. We're also going to make sure with our front view, move this over so we can get it kind of lined up with that reference. Excellent. Okay. That's looking pretty good. So I like both of these polygons. I can even see now this is lining up exactly along that rim. So this is good. My next step is going to turn off my X-ray mode. I need to add some extra information in here. So I need to add multi-cut. And I'm going to make sure that my snap is set to, let's say 50%. We'll just key that in. And that'll allow for when I hold down my Control and Shift, it's going to go right down the middle. That's pretty helpful. I'm going to do that again. So multi-cut, Control and Shift, Control Shift. Okay. I'm going to double click, and double click with my edges selected. Now I'm going to scale this up. And what we're doing is trying to make it so this matches that reference. This is looking pretty close to how far that scale is occurring upwards. So that's good. If we look at my reference here too, I have one more multi-cut that I add here and here. Now I can't see that, so I'll turn off X-ray. I'm going to double click, scale that out a little bit more, scale it down. It looks a little bit more like this. Okay. Now that I have this, what I need to do is kind of finish up the way that the side is. I have a hubcap in there. I have some other details in there. So the way to do that, I'm going to go into my side view. Right now it's called front because I set it up wrong. But for me, if I'm in there and I go and deselect this, make sure I go back to that. So if I'm in here and I just hold down Shift and scale that in, I'm copying where these edge loops are being added. And I'll look into my other reference to see how this looks when I am finished with it. But for now, I just want to trace essentially the same layout or as close to that as possible. And then I'll move around the positions of this in 3D space. So that looks pretty good with what this reference is, as far as I can tell using this side. Now you notice I didn't do that to the other side, and that's okay because I don't want to work on the other side. I'll mirror that over later. So let's turn off X-ray. And I did supply the model on Sketchfab. So if we were to go to Sketchfab and pull this up, this is the model. So we can easily see the 3D on this and how it's kind of pushing and pulling inwards and outwards on that. And so I want the wheel to kind of balloon outwards and then at the hubcap tuck itself back in. So to do that, I'm going to make sure I have that reference up and loaded for me to look at, and then just go around and start to pull certain pieces out. And then go around there. We'll start to push pieces in. And so I think we're close to where that should be. If yours are a little bit off compared to this, I'm looking for a nicely defined hubcap. It doesn't need to be 100% like how mine is, but the wheel and the hubcap needs to look like it was properly created, and it looks like something that is visually appealing and doesn't have any strange edge loops on there. Okay, so I'm going to deselect some of this stuff. Okay. Again, I'm going to go into my scale tool, hold down the yellow to scale all, pull out a little bit. So I'm kind of pulling out a hubcap, or at least this section here. I'll double click here and pull this out to give me a little bit more of a flat edge to that. And I will double click. So if I start here, holding down shift, click another time, and then for the third time double click, it'll give me that whole loop. And I'll just select all these there too. I am going to push this in further. And I'm going to push it in one more time. That way I just have a hold edge right there so it hardens. And let's take this section right there. Again, I'm ignoring what's happening on the other side because I'm going to mirror that over. I'm going to pull this out. So there, and something like that. Okay. Doesn't have to look exactly like that, but it should look nice and identifiable as some sort of a hubcap here. Don't go too crazy off of my reference though. I want you guys to be trying to represent what I'm giving you as much as possible. So if this hubcap is square or something, then you're not following the instructions. I need a hold edge right here, so that way when this smooths, it's not going to be just completely a hump. It actually has a hard edge. So I'm going to hit bevel, and let's hold on one more time. Bevel. And my controls have disappeared on me. Let's see. Bevel. Let's try it one more time. Bevel, where are you? Okay. Let me delete history here and see if that helps. Edit, delete by type history. And double click. I have my controls. Bevel. Okay. It's a bit strange that my bevel controls have disappeared. However, I did get that bevel. I'm just going to pull this in. I'm going to reset Maya after I create this wheel so you guys won't see that error. Alright. How do I get that tread? Well, that tread's actually pretty easy to do. We just have to pick every other loop. So if I go, and you'll see, from here to here, double click, here, here, double click. Make sure you have it in selection mode and you're not in scale or move. That way you're not accidentally moving around geometry. This is something I see all the time when people are working on this wheel. Their wheel goes from looking like a wheel to this really smushed, terrible looking object. So make sure you aren't moving your objects around. If the reference is getting in your way, turn it off. Right now, just a simple idea of double. That usually will happen if you see that I have an edge or too many faces selected and it's causing that. So there we go. We're almost there. Alright. I have all these selected. If I pull back my reference, I'm pulling that out. So actually, before I do that, no, we'll do it now. I'm going to extrude this out. So I'm pulling this out. I don't want to go too far. So maybe around here. I'm going to hit G again. Pull this out. And hit G one more time so I can have a hold edge on that. So it maintains that crisp look to it. Alright. Now you might notice this actually doesn't look the same. I have this V shape here and it's not on this. That's actually pretty easy to do. What we need to do is make sure we're in the proper viewport. So I'm going to go into, for me it's side, hopefully yours is front, if you didn't mess it up like me. We're going to go in and rotate this. And now we have this natural V tread on there. If we wanted to, we can even push that further just by double clicking around our center edges and then push that even more. Okay. Looking good. Now's a good chance that if we have this selected, we can hit 3 so we can see what would happen when we hit smooth. Okay, so we're seeing some strangeness on the edge. It's not completely round on there, or it's rounding out. To fix that, go and hit 1 again. That is because we don't have hold edges on our tread. And that needs to be on these. Now I could go on both sides and do that over and over and over again, but I'm only going to select the ones on this side. Reason why? So I'm going to mirror over the geometry onto the other side. So always think smarter, not harder. If you're doing this, if you find yourself doing something that's repetitive, try and figure out a way that you're able to save yourself time. Okay, so that's looking good. I can hit bevel on that. And my tool disappeared. So I don't know if that bevel wants to behave the way it's supposed to. Let's see what happens if I smooth this. It's like a little bit better. I'd like that to be tighter. So I'll adjust that after the video once I restart Maya. But bevel that to get some harder edges. It should be a lot thinner than that. And then we're basically done with the wheel. The only thing we need to do is get rid of half of it and make sure that we go into our mirror. And you'll notice as soon as I press mirror, it's flipping it. That's not good. The reason why it's doing that is because I put a modification to this object. It's actually on a rotation of X. So bevel is, or mirror is going to attempt to do that with the default 0 on our cylinder. And so that's not going to help. So if I go into edit delete by type and then modify freeze transformations, if I were to apply this now, bevel or mirror, oh cool, now that tool is disappearing. Okay. Okay, so we are back, and I have gotten my menus back. I had to reset my workspace, and the menus are now appearing again. That is a massive glitch. Super fun. But let's talk about this. So we were talking about when we were trying to mirror this over. If we had this set with any rotation or anything like that, it really doesn't know how to properly do that. So if we were to press mirror and then turn this axis to be on the Z, so we want it to go on the Z axis across, and then turn cut geometry off, and then make the axis position the object. So it's the object, it's on cut geometry is off, and axis is Z. We have all the details that we worked on both sides showing up, and there we go. So it's looking pretty good. Now I didn't smooth this, I'm just using that smooth preview by pressing 3, and I'm able to experiment with some of these shapes now. And if I hit 2, it's going to give me the smooth preview with the low poly cage on there as well, which it's helpful. I find it extremely noisy when trying to work, so I'll usually go back and forth between 1 and 3. Your preference is if you're able to figure that stuff out and see all that together, great. I'm dumb, so I need to make sure I'm just toggling between these two. So I've got the wheel. I'm going to turn that one into a layer. So wheel. So now it's been added to a layer. Hide it. And now let's talk about the actual truck. So the body of the truck is actually a cube that has been extruded. And if we look at the reference here, the reference is showing me that if I started with a cube like this and started pulling outwards in different directions, I could get the details of that pretty quickly. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a box. I'm going to line this up, and I'm going to go into my back viewport. And I'm going to try and get this as close as possible to my reference. And for now, I'm only going to work in this viewport. So I'm going to start by blocking out my model. That's what the concept is. You're just kind of taking chunks and moving them around. And so right now, that's good. I'm going to grab just this face over on the side. So on the left side, I want this one. And I'm going to hold down Shift, drag that out. Shift, drag that out. I'm going to turn off my grid so you guys can actually see what this is and not think that the grid is also the polygon object. I'm going to hold down Shift and drag that out. Hold down Shift, drag that out, and then one more time to about here. I'm going to do the same thing with the back. Shift, drag it out, and Shift and drag that out, and again, 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 and again. Okay. Now I need to pull up the top, and the top is going to just be these two. So making sure that I'm in my orthographic viewport again. Shift, drag up, and then Shift, drag up. So good. Now that I have this, I can start to kind of push and pull the vertices around to make this make sense. So I'm going to go to my front view, and obviously for me, because I have it screwed up, I think it's probably side. There we go. Let's only work on half, because it's crazy to think that we should waste all of our time making both sides. So we're only going to make half, and let's block it out. I know I have a line straight down, so I'm going to go to about here and then go into my tools and use multi-cut straight down the middle. There we go. Alright, now I know that this also kind of bends out that way, but for now I'm going to leave that alone. So I have these two shapes that are working. It's getting close to that shape. I also notice that I'm missing an edge loop right here, so let's fix that. Multi-cut, and we'll add that. Now don't worry, if it's in the middle, we can always move that. We're going to go into shading and X-ray. Push that back, and now we can start to shape. Right click, go to vertex mode, drag that over, drag that one kind of over. And with this, I notice I have some more stuff going on here too, where I have a loop going across here. So let's add that too. So I'm going to use a multi-cut, Control Shift to add a loop. Double click, we'll put it in position. Back to multi-cut, Control Shift and click. There we go. Now we can start to block out the rest of this. So if I were to move all this over, that's actually not what's happening. What's happening is we have the front of our vehicle, and in our reference, if I pull this over, you'll see it's actually this piece that's the front that's curving inwards. So we need to make sure we're doing that instead of just pulling all that geometry over. So instead, if we grab just this front of the hood, the middle section, go into our side viewport and pull that out, that's actually what we're seeing. We also have these two that are pushed over like that. That's exactly what that is going on. Now, with the wheel wells, it's a little bit difficult to see here in this reference. However, if we were to look at the model, the wheel wells are actually just pulled upwards. So those are tucked inwards just a little bit. So that's what's giving us that hump. That's pretty easy to do. We can take this and let's see. We'll take this. I'm also, before I do that, going to add a multi-cut for later on. I just know I want to keep that there, although the reference doesn't have that. I'm going to take vertices, select this one, select this one, and pull up. And what I'm doing is creating that wheel well. And this is why I wanted that to be there. There we go. So I'm making that shape that's going to give the appearance of the wheel well of a truck. And that's looking pretty good. I have a larger one in the back than in the front, but that's okay. We're just trying to maintain that shape as nice as possible. I can scale both of these. There we go. So that's good. So I have now, if I look at my model, made this. We haven't done much to the front, so let's do that. First thing I'm going to do, I know it says side, but it's my front. Go into X-ray, grab this, drag it over that one. Let's drag that over to this shape here. Let's grab these vertices and pull them out. That's a lot better. And now, let's look at our top. We haven't seen that yet. So if we go into top, and we go to shading, X-ray, we can see, just move that out of the way really quick. That's my like roll cage or my light bar, so that is kind of getting confusing there. But if I look at my reference and zoom out, there we go. It's a lot easier to see that. So I know in here I'm basically just pulling down, so I'm extruding downwards to make that inside of the truck. And to do that, so let's work on the bed here. So if we go X-ray mode off and select everything in here. Now that's going to cause a problem. The problem that's going to happen is that if I extrude this down, I'm going to have this very thin lip. Let's look at our reference again and see how that's done. Okay, so the way that that's being handled is I actually have another edge loop going in here. It's right across the edge of this piece. There's one here, two, and then our middle line. So let's see what we have on ours. Okay, so we only have one. That's going to cause that issue with us. So let me add another edge loop down the front of my car using multi-cut. I'm going to double click on it and move it over as much as I can. Now I have this shape right here. I don't want to wreck that, so I'm just going to move that over a little bit. And that's good. And now I have some more res that I can work on in here, and if we look at the reference, that is following that shape still, so that's good. So I have that loop right there. It's going all the way down. That's good. So if I go into here again, 1, 2, okay, all these, and hold down Shift, drag it down. Alright, I made an accident. It's not actually really an accident at all. It's just that I have this metal section that doesn't need to exist. So if I grab all the faces here and deselect these, turn off reference to make sure I'm not selecting anything else I don't want, hit delete, and now I've gotten rid of those, and that issue right there is gone. Okay, starting to get good. What we need to do here, let's just kind of pull that out a little bit to give it a little bit more of a rounded backing. So I'm going to grab all 4 of these as well. I'm going to round that off. Uh-oh. It looks like, for whatever reason there is, this guy is not connected. So for whatever reason, there's a glitch there. So, easy way to fix that. You can delete it, and then go in to make sure there's nothing else that should be there. So I'm just going to actually go into this, hit delete. Vertice, just pull these around and make sure, oh, I still have some issues there. So I'm going to just delete this one now. Good. Good. And I'm giving these a tuck just to make sure that there aren't any other pieces hidden in there. And that's just the way, oh, looks like one's hidden in there too. So hopefully I'm not on a goose chase and I'm making all these. Yep, it looks good. So it was just a couple of these that for some reason I had an extrusion applied to it. So to get rid of these, there we go. I clean that up. How do you fix this? Just go across from this side and hit bevel, or sorry, bridge. There we go. That's fixed. And now let's fix that like I was trying to do 300 minutes ago. So I'm just trying to smooth this back out a little bit so it doesn't feel so hard edged. And then we'll move this top lip back a little bit more too. Okay. May not be exactly like my reference, but I think it looks better. Alright, so I gotta make my windows and I gotta make my bumpers on this thing. And if I were to turn on smooth preview with 3, this looks like not so good. And we also have a giant gaping hole here. That's because I have a hole literally in here. So I just have to make sure I clean that up. Bridge. There. Now hit 3. There we go. We fixed that. So we need to have some hold edges on here to prevent these things from smoothing out that much. But before I do that, I'm just going to turn on my reference and make sure I have the rest of this going. So I'm going to go into my side viewport. I'm going to go into X-ray and start to tweak this. Okay, that's looking good for the front for the window. Let's make sure if we go into perspective. Okay, so the window's coming out more, so we need to make sure that we are following that by just selecting these vertices And just those vertices and pulling those forward. Okay. Now it's looking pretty good. Now I need to make sure that I apply a... Let's just try and get these over a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to move these up just a hair. Okay. So this is getting there. What I need to do is grab these two, this one and these, and I'm going to go into my modeling toolkit and go into extrude, pull this in to make my window. Now I made a face that I don't need. Get rid of that. We'll clean this up before we work any further. This tucked down a little too much, so I'll move this up. And then this one, maybe pull this in just a hair. Oh. Okay. Now I can add some hold edges. Oh, I have another one. Get rid of that. So at this stage, we can start to think about hold edges. Actually, let's create the bumper in the front too. Extrude that. Pull this straight out. And I'm just going to push this one back so it's a little bit more aligned with that. And get rid of this face. And do the same thing back here. So we'll have this one, that one, and that one. And we'll hit extrude, pull out. Trying to make sure that they're similar in extrusions. So maybe about there. And again, we're going to make that so it's more flush and makes sense. Okay. So we're at the stage of making hold edges, which we'll do next.